Hello viewers, wherever you are. It's nice of you to come and watch our show on a Wednesday at 8 o'clock BST again. Tonight I have a lovely fellow, Chris Atlee, who styles himself the Atheist Pastor. Now, because it's coming up to 5 o'clock tomorrow morning where he is, and I thought it would be a bit cruel to expect him to get up and be bright and chirpy at that time of his day, I actually recorded our show with him earlier today. And I'm just waiting for it to finish rendering. I thought it had finished earlier, but apparently not. So it's on 94%. It won't be a minute now. Meanwhile, there is an interview between Chris and I on the Atheist Alliance International Archive that you can watch. Those little short interviews I try to keep to 10 minutes. But Chris is, he's voluble. Not volleyball, voluble. He speaks a lot. And it was as much as I could do to pin him down to 17 minutes. But it's there for you to watch whenever you feel the need. I'd also like to tell you about next week's guest, because I'm really pleased to announce we have Professor A.C. Grayling. I've long been a fan of his. In fact, if you visit our Facebook site, you'll see on the events there a picture of him and me, because he came on a tour, a lecture tour to promote a book some years ago, and I went to see him when he was in Brighton and got the selfie together with him. Right. Well, the recording has rendered, so I'm going to go straight into playing it for you. And of course, the usual rules apply. If you want to ask a question, you put a Q in front of your. In fact, I may take some comments today because since I don't have him here live, the only person who can answer your question will be me. So let's have a look at your comments too. You can make comments and I might post some of those on screen as well. Okay, so here we go with the share. Hi, Chris. I understand you.
Good evening.
I understand you just survived the snow on your way to Canberra.
Yeah, well, you know what? They say it doesn't snow in Australia. Everyone pictures it as this dry, hot, place with bikini-clad, beautiful people. But I can assure you, it snows, and I did cop a little bit of snow over the weekend, which was good fun. Good fun.
Yeah. Well, at least you're obviously. I normally ask, "How the devil are you?" But I can see that you're in the peak of health. Look,
I'm fighting fit. I'm doing quite well at the moment. Doing quite well. Take on the world.
Now, for a former nearly pastor, I understand you've become a mythicist. Isn't this something of a pendulum swing?
Yeah, just slightly. So look, I'm what you'd call. I'm not a hard mythicist, but I'm a historian. And when I look at the evidence as a historian for the existence of Jesus, I really have a lot of difficulty with it. That if you have a look at there's no issue with there could have been a carpenter called Yeshua ben Joseph who lived in Bethlehem, and there's no issues. Sorry, we lived in Nazareth, not Bethlehem. No issues with that. He might have even gone around causing a bit of trouble. Once again, no issues with that. But the character of Jesus, the first problem we've got is there's different characters of Jesus in the Gospels. You've got the Matthew, Mark, and Luke version, which Mark is the original Gospel that was written around about, at a guess, about 50 years after what would have been the death. Possibly some will put it a little bit earlier, but it's roughly in that time period. Matthew comes in and
that's a lifetime, isn't it? That's a lifetime, isn't it?
Well, back then it was, because it's we're very fortunate that we can live till 100 now. That wasn't always as common back in those days. I mean, if famine and disease didn't get you, war certainly did. And as well as that, the communication levels that we have now, you've got to remember that isn't something that existed back then. And I often look at it this way: it'd be like me writing an eyewitness account of the Vietnam War. Now, I can write about the Vietnam War because I researched it, studied it, know things about it. But I wasn't there. In fact, I wasn't even alive when the Vietnam War occurred. And then as you go further back, Matthew and Luke are essentially corrections of some of the errors that Mark makes. For instance, there's some geographical issues, some issues surrounding Jewish customs that show that it was not written by someone. Well, it probably wasn't even written by someone who was Jewish or of that faith. It was more than likely written by a Greek speaker, and the same with Matthew and Luke. And then you've got John, which is a completely different characterization of Jesus again. Things happen in different order. It's just, if you were to read, say, Mark and John, which I guess are the original sources for those two, or for those two characters of Jesus, it's a different character. So it's impossible that person or that character could have existed, because it's a different character through the Gospels. Even if you have a look at the lineage difference, there's a lineage, because they have to prove the lineage going back to David, because the prophecy said he'd come from the house of David. They've got these lineages that go back. The problem is the lineage in Matthew and the lineage in Luke are completely different.
But even so, even if the lineage has been proven, later we discover that Jesus didn't have a human father anyway.
Well, that's it. So it's and look, the Christian me would have said, well, clearly one's written for a Greek audience, one's written for a Jewish audience, and the Jewish goes through the line of the mother. But that's actually completely bunk, as I now know. It's Jewish heritage is considered through the mother. However, it's was the son of Joseph, and then so on through the male line.
Yeah, exactly, because the lineage goes down the male line. So.
Yeah, the problem is by the time the Council of Nicaea met hundreds of years later, both were so widely circulated that they couldn't discount either of them. They had to include them both. Errors and all. So, but back in those days, it probably didn't matter too much, because only the clergy could read, and only the clergy was delivering the message. So, the average folks didn't really start reading the Bible until, the Lutheran sort of revolution, or the Protestant Revolution. But even then, it's the literacy rates weren't particularly high.
Yeah. So what I want to do is get your thoughts on a presentation that I did when I was being opposed by a Answers in Genesis pastor.
Oh, this will be fun. This will be fun.
Believe it or not, we have a branch of Answers in Genesis just down the road here in the UK. In West.
So you see, we did the smart thing. We sent Ken Ham over to the US. Yes. And as I keep telling Americans, we've got a very strict no returns policy. So he's over there now. He can stay. Yes, but they're not too bad here. Although there's certainly in my Christian days, certainly I did have some of their material. Theirs and good old Kent Hovind, of course. His DVDs always did the round of churches.
And Banana Man.
Oh, Banana Man. Oh, yeah. I just want to be very clear. He's from New Zealand. He's not Australian. He is from New Zealand, not one of us.
You narrowly escaped having the Noah's Ark theme park near you.
I can assure you, no Australian government would ever build that. we're very very fortunate. Only in America is what they say, and I think only in America for Noah's Ark.
Yes, indeed. Well, let me get this up and we'll have a look at it.
Sounds good. It's because there we go. That's the full screen slideshow now. So
good. Okay. So when we came up with the title, "The Bible is an Authentic Book," I thought, well, yes, it is. It's a book. That's an authentic thing. And so is Lord of the Rings and Harry Potter. So I had to look up authentic, and there's the definition with an example of how it's used. But I suspect that Christians would actually want authentic to mean true.
Well, and they would probably have a different definition of, I guess we would say that, okay, yes, it's authentic. It was put together at the Council of Nicaea. However, Christians would say that the origins of it go much further back. So say for the New Testament, they would call them eyewitness claims. They would certainly say that all the epistles of Paul were written by Paul, when in fact they weren't. I think we can confirm 7 of the 13 epistles of Paul were written by Paul. There's 2 that could go either way, and the rest most certainly weren't. So there is that question of, okay, their version of authentic and our version of authentic are going to be very different, even with the Jewish side of the Old Testament side of it. That dates to 500 BC. However, what would be taught, or the Christian version would be that the first 5 books were written by Moses, when in fact they certainly weren't. And we can pretty much say with about 99% surety that Moses actually never existed. He's a character of fiction, similar to like a Hercules.
Yeah, that's what Francesca Stavrokopoulou says. That there was no evidence for Moses ever existing.
No, in fact, we can guarantee that that Moses, or certainly didn't exist in the way that he's depicted, because we know that the Jews weren't in Egypt. We know that we've got archaeological records that indicate different groups were in the area at the time. The Phoenicians and so on. Anyway, sorry, I've gone on a tangent there.
So I've got the synonyms slide up now. Can you see that?
I can.
Good. Yeah. So if the definition doesn't meet your needs, sometimes you can find a synonym to give you the requirement. And if you look at that list of synonyms for authentic, you'll find that there is true, but it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 down the list. So
yeah, look, I would think that a better question would be, is it accurate rather than authentic? I think there's certainly a discussion. I guess you can get into the semantics of wording. I guess it all comes down to the intent of the question, and I would imagine the intent, is it authentic, would probably be to imply, is it accurate, is it true?
Yes. Well, I went with the suggestion of my opponent. That was he determined the motion that we should debate. So I just played along.
They always like to pick the question or the terminology.
Yeah, absolutely. So my opponent then went on to give us a biblical quote. He quoted John 21, verses 24 and 25. Now, I don't do biblical quotes because, for a start, I don't consider the Bible to be a reliable source of information. And you can't confirm the Bible by quoting the Bible. You need an alternative, independent source. What do you say?
Yeah. Well, that's a verse that basically says that it's testifying to itself that what it says is true. I mean, you can get that out of anything. These are actual events that happened. It doesn't mean that they're true. In fact, if it's coming from John, I mean, John was written probably 100 years after the death of Jesus, or the supposed death of the Jesus character, or thereabouts. At the best, probably 90 years. So it's completely if that's the best that they've got, saying, well, the Bible's true because the Bible says it's true.
How more can you get an argument?
Yeah, I mean, it's checkmate atheists.
Yes. So then he gave us a poem. Is this typing for you?
Oh, yes. Okay.
It's a bit slow, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah, okay, so let's talk poetry, and let's talk poetry of, let's talk poetry of around the time of the Jesus character would have existed. Let's talk about the Roman poet Catullus. Now, Catullus used to write about how his love for Lesbia, she was the most beautiful woman in the world. Now, just because he wrote that in poetry doesn't mean that she was the most beautiful woman in the world. Maybe in his opinion. Yeah, he also wrote some things about some fairly crude things that he wanted to do to his friends who called him a sissy. If you ever get the chance, read his 16th poem. Spoiler, little spoiler. It's not one for the kids, but once again, it's a poem. So what? I can find you poems, songs. It's opinions, it's feeling. Okay, and the love of God, mercy. So by Mercy Me, well, Mercy Me is a Christian band. That's actually just realised who that is. That's it's actually not a poem. If he said he's a poem, he might have been telling a fib, which that's not good for a Christian, I guess. But they're actually a Christian band.
Yeah, I researched it and found that it's a verse from a hymn rather than.
Oh, okay.
So
yes.
But anyway, you're right. I mean, I never supply poetry. It's fine. It's entertainment, but it's not evidence. So up until now, then, he's provided no evidence for the authenticity of the Bible. And I also rarely do quotes, and unless they're funny, because they're usually just appeals to authority. What the quoter is doing is saying, look, this highly respected person believes this, so you should too.
and look, if we want to quote the Bible, we can quote the Bible. Ezekiel 23:20 says, "There she lusted after her lovers with genitals like those of a donkey and a mission that flowed like that of a horse." So what? What does that prove? Absolutely nothing. And the same as the verse from John 21:24 and 25. It proves absolutely nothing.
But it does give you an amazing image in your mind.
Certainly does. It certainly does. But you think, like I said, you think that's good? Read Catullus. That's
okay.
Wow.
So the quotes that theists like to give are not usually modern. They like to source things that were said back in history. When let's face it, we knew very little. We didn't know much about anything. Or they quote irrelevant celebrities like the fairy tale author C.S. Lewis. He's one of their favorites.
Oh, yes. Oh, yeah. It's everything's of the devil except for his works because he liked Jesus.
Yes.
Harry Potter, that's wicked and of the devil. But the Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe is fine.
I reference him in a minute. So then my opponent went on to outline what he called the hallmarks of authenticity. Okay?
Well, this should be good.
Yeah, exactly. Notice he doesn't designate it evidence. He calls it hallmarks. So here was his first one. Documents should be considered to be true unless proven otherwise.
Absolutely not. No. In fact, no. Okay, this is me speaking as a historian. As a historian, we're skeptical of all documents unless we can prove that it's actually accurate. We can demonstrate that it's actually a primary source, or at the very least comes from a primary source document. That's not how history works.
No, ideally you want lots of documents that corroborate each other independently.
Exactly. I mean, if I were to go and pick up one of the Times of the World or whatever it is, where it's like, aliens abducted me and all that kind of stuff. Or the Queen's really a lizard person, things like that. You know, should we assume that is true unless proven otherwise? No, it's not guilty unless proven innocent. It's innocent unless proven guilty.
My favourite is there's a Ford Cortina on the moon. That was great.
What, you think it still starts?
So anyway, given that he was trying to extol the virtues of the Bible, surely one of the requirements of these hallmarks is to distinguish it from other scriptures that also claim to provide explanations and to be perhaps a source of morality and to offer salvation. So,
do we accept the Bhagavad Gita as well?
Okay.
The Quran.
Yes, exactly. So let's keep these hallmarks, or let's keep these other scriptures in mind when we are considering his hallmarks. Let's see whether they could apply to the Quran and the Book of Mormon. So he gave us 5 there, the first one. Could we apply that to the Quran and the Book of Mormon? I think we could.
You could apply that to Star Wars.
Yes. And what he's proposing is that we should tolerate falsehood for an indefinite period.
Well, I've got bad news for him just on his first premise. I mean, sorry, I assume it was a he being a Christian you were debating, because, you know, the Bible does say women shouldn't teach, and I assume that he's a good Christian who follows that. So we can prove otherwise, that either Matthew or Luke is false because they have different lineages. They both can't be right.
Yes.
When Jesus was crucified is different in John as opposed to Matthew, Mark, and Luke. So one of them is wrong. So we've actually proven, just in those inconsistencies, that at least one of them's wrong. And if one of them's wrong, in that case, if we're talking about the authenticity of the Bible by that standard, well, we've proven otherwise. So,
yes,
debate over.
And that idea should also cover Aesop's fables and Grimm's fairy tales. They should be
absolutely
true until proven otherwise.
You could apply it to absolutely anything. But that's not how it works. It's not guilty unless proven innocent. It's innocent unless proven guilty. The same applies for evidence. You don't just, as from a historical perspective, we don't just take a document and say, oh, okay, this must be true. Otherwise, we'd pick up, like the Iliad, and we, even though, yes, we'd say absolutely that Troy existed. We know that Troy existed. But do we assume that the Trojan War happened in the way that it happened, and that, Zeus blessed, and Achilles was part god, and that things happened in the way that they happened? No, we don't. We know that there's some little bit of
It's a good idea to
deal with it,
really, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. It is. Yeah.
So I think what he's trying to do here is to reverse the burden of proof.
Yeah, absolutely. That's what's happened. Absolutely.
It's a very bad policy. Let's face it.
Well, it's all they've got, really.
Yes. Okay, so while we're on the subject of proof, so the problem is that from the point of view of an ex-science teacher, there's no such thing. Proof is just a concept. It doesn't exist in nature.
It's an interesting.
We don't have proof.
Interesting concept.
Because proof requires absoluteness. We haven't found any, neither can we make any. So we've got to make do with evidence.
Mm-hmm.
Bloody good stuff, evidence, by the way.
It is. I like evidence.
So moving on, the next silly statement he claims, his next hallmark, is that authors should be considered truthful unless proven otherwise. So
premise 2 is the same as premise 1.
It is really, isn't it? Yes. So it's saying that nothing's fictitious. Agatha Christie was actually reporting events rather than making up a great story.
Well, I hope the police are investigating those murders. But once again, it comes. Let's if we're looking at the Bible, okay. So is it Matthew or is it Luke who's got the correct lineage? Only one of them can have the correct lineage. One of them's wrong. One of them's right. Which one is it?
Yes.
When was Jesus crucified? Is it the same as according to John, or according to the other three?
Yes.
Which one's right? They can't both be right.
No. And we could apply this very unwise doctrine to the Quran and the Book of Mormon.
We could.
It was authored. They were authored.
Prove to me Joseph Smith made it all up.
Yes. And the other thing is, if we're going to adopt this policy of believing, how long should we wait for something to be discredited? Would you say 2,000 years is enough?
I'd like to think at least enough, but the only problem, if that's the case, then we've got to buy into Mormonism, Islam, and Scientology. So
Yes.
I'd like to shorten that a little bit if we can.
Yes, yeah. Shorter the better. Okay.
It seems like some great minds are thinking alike here with your bullet points.
Yeah. Well, there was art forgeries too. We didn't believe them. In fact, we locked up people when we discovered that they were crooks. And there's been money forgeries too.
Actually, Piltdown Man's a classic example. There's a forgery.
Yes. Yes.
Absolute forgery.
Yes.
Should we? Well, actually, I wonder, being from Answers in Genesis, should we assume that Charles Darwin is telling the truth?
Well, we shouldn't assume that, but
Well, according to his, its author should be considered truthful, and that's proved no. Charles Darwin.
what he gave us is some testimony that can be tested.
Yes, that's right.
And since it's been regularly tested over the past over 150 years, it's always come out as correct. So, another thing he said is that the more people who claim to have seen it, whatever it was, the more credible it is.
I love it when Christians bring this one up because they talk about how there was thousands of witnesses, but they can never tell you who they were. It's just like if I put at the end of Star Wars, there was 1 million people who witnessed the end of the Death Star or the destruction of the Death Star. That means nothing. There was no large number of witnesses. In fact, there is absolutely zero, and I mean zero, primary source evidence of the existence of Jesus. There's nothing. There is not one eyewitness account or testimony for him having existed.
No, I agree. There's a number of problems here. First of all, there's a couple of different sorts of witnesses. There's eyewitnesses, which allegedly were there and actually detected with their sense organs what went on. And then there's hearsay witnesses, which were merely told, and we don't know how long the chain of telling was. So that's very dubious as a source of information.
Extremely dubious. At the best, once again, the Book of Acts was written 60 years later, 60 years after what would have been the death of Jesus. And the reason we say roughly is because of the difference in the stories in John as opposed to the other Gospels about what occurred when Jesus died and what day he actually died on. There's a 3 year gap that it could be between 32 and 35. So we say roughly 50 to 60 years because was it 32? Was it 35? Was it 7 years prior? Who knows? It's a lot of guesswork actually. But there's absolutely no witnesses. There is zero witnesses. So I mean that point is absolutely mute. Just saying there was he fed 5,000 people. Okay, well, who were they? Where were they? Why is there no evidence of or anything written or any other story told about it? There's absolutely nothing. And the Romans, and Christians will say the Romans didn't keep good records. The Romans kept impeccable records. We know exactly who was where, when. We've got evidence of battles occurring. We knew how the Romans lived. We've got Roman poetry. We've got so much information from that era but nothing about Jesus, so there is no witnesses. So straight away, there is no witness. Even if he existed, there's no one who said anything about him.
Well, in terms of the modern meaning of the word witness, a hearsay witness wouldn't really be called in court. Because
but even a hearsay witness, I mean, we're talking about events 60 years later, at a time where people lived to the ripe old age of about 40.
Yes, and the other modern meaning of the word witness is somebody that you can put in the dock and interrogate.
Yes,
you have to be alive. And you can't do that with 2,000-year-old tales.
It's like Luke says, it's claimed that Luke is an excellent historian. And the reason that it's, people say that, or Christians say that Luke is an excellent historian is because Luke says, I am an excellent historian.
Furthermore, the numbers, that's another fallacy, because it really doesn't matter how many people believe something. It doesn't make it any more true, because once upon a time, everybody believed that the sun went round the earth, and they were all wrong. No matter it was a very big number of everyone.
That did seem to be the prevailing thought for a period of time, but it seems as though we knew the Earth was round, then we devolved to flat because the Bible said so, and then we finally got back to science.
Yes. In any case, we can apply this hallmark equally well to the Quran and the Book of Mormon, because I'm sure they quote dead witnesses too.
Well, the Book of Mormon starts with people who supposedly witnessed the events, who signed it.
Yes,
it must be true. I'm sure there were billions of witnesses actually probably trillions of witnesses to the rise of power of Scientology's boogeyman Lord Xenu. I mean, he did control a galactic federation after all, so there'd be trillions of witnesses.
Yes.
So
wasn't he a walrus?
It depends on who you ask, but he was some kind of weird looking. I know he had a fleet of DC-10 planes. So
yes. So another problem is if we recognise that what we don't have witnesses who saw with their eyes that we can interrogate and see whether their stories are consistent. So what we've got are merely reports. These are hearsay stories that are like fishermen's tales,
Yeah, exactly. We don't even have the names of the supposed witnesses. We just have that a great many people saw, and that's it. Okay, well, claim. Can we get one name? Just one. We'll take one name. Give us one witness.
Not only are these not witnesses but reports, but they're also old reports by people who possibly weren't alive at the time of the events they claim to be reported.
Most certainly weren't alive.
Yeah.
And if they were, they would have been too young to comprehend it.
Yes, exactly, too young to write it down. So even if we take the two non-Christian Roman historians who do mention Jesus, and you might think they're an independent source, Josephus and Tacitus.
No, well, Josephus is a proven forgery. The forgery was done by, and his name escapes me, but he was the personal historian of Constantine. And the reason we know it's a forgery is because earlier Christian writers never referenced this verse. In fact, they actually commented that, how awful Josephus was for not mentioning or not talking more about Jesus. But once again, that was written in 95 AD.
Yes. So he wasn't born at the time of the events.
No, and all he actually says is there are there's a tribe called the Christians who believe that their Messiah died and came back to life. You know what? No one's arguing that there were Christians. There are Christians now. We know there are Muslims, Hindus. There's a lot of different. It means nothing.
Yep. So here's my bullet points again.
Yep, there we go. It's once again, I think we're pretty much on the same path here.
Yeah. Have you come up against prosopagnosia?
No, I haven't actually.
This is poor people who are so bad at recognizing and remembering a face, they can't recognize their own family reliably.
Okay. Yeah, that would probably explain a few people I know.
So that casts doubt on even eyewitnesses, which are the better of the two sorts of witnesses. Okay.
And that's right about the independent Roman historians from that time that Christians claim there was no records or no evidence of. But they love to go to Josephus and Tacitus. And I mean, Tacitus was 2nd century. I mean,
yeah.
It's how far do we want to go?
He's just reporting a myth, isn't he?
Yeah, it'd be like saying Ken Ham's a reliable source.
Yes. So, hallmark number 4. He claimed that there was consistency of the evidence within the text, and therefore that made it more authentic. Now, I don't think you'll agree with that.
No, I think I've mentioned a few examples, very obvious examples that we probably don't need to repeat again. But I think we've already disproven number 4.
Yes, even if you go back to the beginning of the Bible, Genesis 1 disagrees with Genesis 2.
That's what happens when you've got people in the Bronze Age trying to explain things. But
so there's no consistency. What there is inconsistency. But
continual inconsistency.
Even if the text was consistent, that doesn't mean it's evident or true, because it's just written, and you can write anything. But if you want to get consistency, what you need is a good editor. I mean, Agatha Christie, for example, and many other faultless fiction writers had a good editor who went through their text and said, hang on, you can't say this because back there you said that.
Yeah, there's no consistency in the Bible. But once again, I come back to the lineage. Is it Matthew or is it Luke? Because that's the obvious one.
Okay, so hallmark number 5. Reliability is confirmed by matching with known events or dated artifacts. Now,
you know what? I agree.
You will know
something. I absolutely agree with that. However, that's not what happens with the Bible. Okay, so known events or dated artifacts. Well, the Bible claims the Earth's 6,000 years old. We've got fossil record that goes back well beyond that. So that's the first thing. Let's talk about the Exodus. There's absolutely, and the Egyptians recorded everything. That's why we know so much about Egyptian history and culture. They recorded absolutely everything. The Jews were not slaves in Egypt. We absolutely know that they didn't build the pyramids. It wasn't the Jews. There was no Moses. There's no archaeological evidence for a lot of it. I mean, they talk about cities and towns. Well, so what? Spider-Man comics talk about New York. That doesn't mean that Spider-Man's accurate. It's the archaeological evidence is not there to prove the Bible. Certain events, yes, okay, the Romans were in Judea. That's historically known. There's no, you wouldn't write without that context. There's the things like the Babylonian exile. Yes, we know that happened. That's because the entirety of the Old Testament was written during the Babylonian exile. But other things like, say, I believe that King David and King Solomon probably did exist. However, they certainly weren't the grand and glorious kings that they're made out to be. More likely, they were localized rulers. And once again, there's a bit of a mythology around them. But the archaeological evidence, once again, isn't there. We know that there was the temple was built after the return from the Babylonian exile. There's no disputing that. But the rest of it doesn't match up. And just because you get one or two things correct doesn't mean that everything else by default is accepted.
No. Well, what archaeology does very well is date artifacts. But what it doesn't do is confirm events.
No, it can confirm stories. Certainly You know, if you were to look at Egyptian hieroglyphics, I think it's fair to say that, you know, when they're talking about, you know, say the death of Tutankhamun, you know, it describes his life, it describes his, well, I say hieroglyphics, I mean, that was their written language. So certainly things like that will confirm, or, you know,
there you have
pretty good evidence
on a piece of datable material. So archaeology does that bit.
With the tomb and, you know, evidence.
There are some events that can be dated by remains, physical remains. So, for example, if I find a bomb in the garden, it's probably evidence that a bomber flew over during the last war. But most events in the Bible left no traces. You can't leave traces of walking on water or being born from a virgin or resurrecting.
Well, look, I think walking on water is probably just ice skating, really. I mean, people do it all day, every day. No, look, it's there, and
that's not how it does
steal. No, it's not how it's depicted. And look, it does steal from other myths. You know, the virgin birth is a common thing because it's throughout that region. You know, virginity was something that was like this very special and up the value of women. So, you know, we couldn't have, you know, the mother of the Lord and Saviour being anything but a virgin, of course.
Yeah.
But no, look, none of that stuff can be proven. And look, certainly you could, as from a historical point of view, if there was a lot of other, or everything else was virtually accurate, it would lend more credence to particular stories. You know, we do know that virgin births can happen and do happen where, you know, people don't necessarily have sex but do everything but, and, you know, that things still get in there. So you know, there's certainly cases like that, or, you know, or potentially we could do you know, in vitro fertilization on someone who hadn't had sex. So it's not an impossibility, but is it likely that a ghost came down and, you know, and had his way with, or had its way, or with Mary? No, it's the evidence would not suggest that.
It's stretching credibility to its limit, isn't it? And as a historian, of course, you all know that historical events range from doubtful to likely to be true. I mean, for example, we have a story of King Canute commanding the tide to stay back. That's probably not true.
Probably not, no.
Story of King Alfred burning the cakes. That's probably very dubious too. But the
and look, if I were to stand outside when it's so it was snowing this weekend and said, "Snow, I command you to go away," and then half an hour it stopped snowing. Now, is that because of natural cycles, or do I have magic powers to make the snow go away? I mean, sometimes coincidence can happen as well, and we just have to look at, you know, what happens in reality.
Yes, absolutely. This is Bayes' theory, isn't it? That you've got to compare the claim with prior knowledge. So what I wanted to talk to you about is, did this not, when you made the transition, provide you with some cognitive dissonance? Was it hard?
It was. See, for me, I don't think there was ever. It wasn't just all of a sudden I stopped believing. For me, I found inaccuracies in the Bible, and, you know, inaccuracies in, like we were just saying, in what we know, you know, I guess the reality of the world is. And that led me down a path of searching, and look, I was desperately trying to prove it correct, because I wanted to be, you know, I wanted to be that guy from Answers in Genesis who would debate someone like you and have the answers and be able to prove you wrong and lead you to Christ. That's why I went down the path.
You had wishful thinkianity.
I know. Well, yeah, I did get to have the conversation with you eventually about the Bible, I guess. So it's, you know, we'll take it. But look, it was a gradual, it was like I lost something almost every day. It's, and especially being someone who studies history, and, it's even though I wasn't actively studying history at the time, not to the extent I am now, of course, but it's always been an interest. You don't go and do, study history and make a career out of it if you don't at least have an interest in it to start with. So, I was always going down that path, and just the more I read, the more I lost from it. And then it sort of led me to, well, what else is out there? I looked at the claims of Hinduism. I didn't bother with Islam because I pretty much that's down the same line as Christianity, because if one if one's completely false, then the other one's completely false. But I just couldn't find anything else out there until one day it just sort of dawned on me. I actively do not believe, and I probably switched to agnosticism, I guess, for a little bit, and then it was really a case of, no, I actively don't believe, or I believe that there is no God. And what the hardest thing for me was, a lot of people talk about a fear of hell. For me, fear of hell was never the issue. Fear of non-existence is what does it for me. The thought that everything I am could just be puffed out in 1 second, that really bothered me. So that was the biggest challenge, and that was what was probably letting me hang on to religion. And now I've just come to accept, well, it is what it is, and there's absolutely nothing I can do about that. And I'm just going to make sure I do the best I can with this life I've got now.
Yeah. So you went on a journey. You went through agnosticism for a bit. Some people go down the spiritualism route, don't they, on their journey, gradually getting away from theism into...
I did that prior to Christianity. I've been I guess I was a searcher for a long time. I used to be right into psychic readings, Reiki healing, ufology, ancient aliens, and all that kind of stuff. Even found myself with a UFO group there for a little while, but truth be told, that was because there was a girl that I rather fancied, and I just kind of went along. But no, I was there, and I listened. I was someone who was actively searching, I guess. I wanted, to find a truth, and and Christianity hit me, because I'm not from a Christian background. And when I found Christianity, I was as surprised as anyone that I converted. And then I was even more surprised, years and years later when I deconverted. And I guess, I looked into Hinduism. I thought that there potentially was something there. I liked the idea of, many gods, and, it's that sort of way of thinking. And, we've got about 5 minutes from my house, we've got the largest Buddhist temple in the southern hemisphere. So I went and had a look at that, and once again, very, very nice. And I'll say they do some great vegetarian food there. But I didn't find that truth I was looking for, because the same things that were stopping with Christianity, in that the fables aren't based in reality, were occurring across all of those lines. So then I thought, well, maybe there's just some deity, or maybe the universe is, an entity. But it's just, I've just fallen away from that completely, to a point where I actively do not believe that that there is any deity. It's and I accept that I take a belief position that there is no deity, or there is no God. I've got no problem with that. And I understand that that's not necessarily everyone's view on what an atheist is. But that's what I am.
Yeah. Okay. You see, the thing is, I meet a lot of people who have become atheists after having been in a religion. And to my way of thinking, they can be some of the most militant atheists, because they've been tricked, and they've realized, and they've grieved for part of their life that they've wasted being deceived. Is that you?
Look, we all go through the angry atheist phase. I was no exception to that. No, so you're fine. You didn't have that. One of the biggest things I regret is I had this really amazing collection of Christian theological books, like a huge library of it. It actually filled large suitcases, and I threw it all out. And I thought, well, I'll give it away to someone else. And then I thought, no, because I don't want anyone using this to promote Christian. And I threw it all out. And now I sort of think, I really wish I had that, because I had my notes in there. I had so much, and we're talking some pretty expensive, like academic books, even those that are about fairy tales. Academic books are bloody expensive, so it's I threw away quite a bit of money. And look, I went down the all religions evil, and you must be stupid to think that. But then it sort of dawned on me that you know what? How would I, as a Christian, have reacted to me as an angry atheist? And me as an angry atheist, me as a Christian, would have looked at the angry atheist and just gone, man, you need Jesus. You've got so much hate in your heart. You've got so much anger. And it's, I did. I had a lot of anger. And whether that was because I'd wasted time or, I don't know. But it was just, I think it was also needing that sense of community. And that's something I'm big on. I think that there's a big need for a sense of community, especially when people get out of religion, because that's the one thing they lose. And I think you'll find that you'll get a lot of people who will get into the atheist community and then want to impress some of these more prominent angry atheists, or the ones who jump up and down and scream and shout and get offended at everything. And I think there's a need to they want to connect into those communities just because they need that community to connect into. So there's possibly a bit of that, and I guess that's part of the reason why what I try and do is have create community where everyone's welcome. If you want to be an angry social justice left-wing atheist, I'm still going to talk to you. If you're a conservative like myself, want you in. It's I think there's a common good that can be fought. It's one thing religion does very well is religion's organised.
Except that it used to be very good when we were not in contact. When there was one group, one tribe of humans, and they all felt unified by the belief system. But unfortunately, there were other tribes of humans.
But with things like, say, social media, the way we communicate now, we're broadcasting live here, where we're talking to each other on the other side of the planet, and we're in the same tribe, whereas my next door neighbour might be in a different tribe, so to speak. But because we've got that connectivity, we can actually find our tribe still. So we've still got that, and I think we're always very defensive of our tribe as well. But so it's
the trouble is, religion is too tribal. It thinks
that we're a tribal species. We've evolved that way.
Yes,
we can't help it. It's what we do. It's our ability to make up stories is why we've been able to. I don't know if you've ever, or anyone who's watching is familiar with *Sapiens* by Noah Harari, or Yuval Noah Harari. He talks about our ability, or the reason we're able to evolve and go further than the ape is our ability to invent things, be it a god, be it currency, be it nationalistic ideas. It's because of that we were able to work together. Because we had that thing in common. That's how we've evolved.
Within a tribe.
Exactly. And because even though we're distance is an issue for us, we're able to still work together within that tribe over distance.
We have a global world now. This is the trouble.
We do.
And what we want is one tribe. Well,
ideally, it's. I would love to see that. It's a dream. I don't think it'll happen in my lifetime.
But
because even within the atheist community, which is meant to be non-religious, we have tribal lines that get drawn. And normally on politics and then cultural interpretations. It's what's important to an atheist in Nigeria is obviously very different to what's important to an atheist in San Francisco. It's an atheist in San Francisco is fighting for very different things, and that's fine. People can fight for whatever they want to fight for, but we've got a way to go, I guess, is what I'm saying.
Yeah. But
I think we're going the right direction.
I hope so. Being social animals, what we really need is one society. Anyway, you say that you're a historian now. Does this mean that, I don't know, you teach history, you curate?
Not yet. Not yet. I'm preparing for. I've already got the subject or the topic picked out for my PhD. Going to do it on Australian military chaplains in the First World War. So it'll probably a few years away, but the plan is to hopefully start teaching it at a university level in the next couple of years. Just depending on what happens with obviously the big global kerfuffle that's going on at the moment. It's sort of made things a little bit difficult, but that is the plan. Yeah, Chris. Plans are almost subject to change, but
oh yes, it was John Lennon who said, "Plans are what you make when other things are happening." No, I haven't got that quote right at all.
That's right. It's there's many a good Lennon quote out there.
Yes.
Most of them under the influence of something.
Chris, I know you need to go now because you've got an urgent appointment, and I know that congratulations on your recent celebration of your wedding anniversary. I hope that went well.
Very much. It did. It was a good night. A little bit of a sore head when I woke up this morning, but that's to be expected when you have copious amounts of wine and good food.
It's that fantastic Australian wine, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Chris, thank you very much for this. And
pleasure, John. Thank you.
As Dave Allen would have said, may your God go with you.
Amen.
Well, what a lovely fellow he is too. So I'm trying to get some of you to join me on screen so that you can have a chat, but you're a bit shy, it seems. Yes, Andy Phillips has posted a reference to the book that he talked about, Sapiens, A Brief History of Mankind by Noel Harari. So you might like to put that on your reading list. Now, you've got a couple of interesting comments here. Again, this is Andy. He agrees with us on the archaeological record and the lack of anything that is left behind in any other source than the Bible by the alleged Jesus. So this is a comment too from our friend Conrad in Canada. Why do so many reasonably educated people accept the veracity of religion? Well, that's a good question, isn't it? Some people say we have a God-shaped hole. I prefer to describe that as curiosity. We have curiosity, and we want to seek patterns, we want to seek explanations, and unless we get them, that sort of need gnaws away at us. And so in the end, we're very likely to accept wrong explanations just because they are the only ones available. The other thing is, of course, people get at us when we're young. I was lucky. My parents weren't religious, but I know a lot of people who were thoroughly inducted into religions and indoctrinated into religion from a very early age. And the Jesuits knew this, didn't they? They said, if you get a boy give me a boy by the age of 7, and I'll tell you what the man will grow into. And so this is the thing. If you force religion along with, the bedtime reading, it's likely to take root while the brain is still developing at that stage of life. So we've actually reached the end of our time, but I don't want to let you go without pushing next week, Professor A.C. Grayling. How about that? Be there. Thank you very much for watching.